Hey, everybody, welcome in. It is the Houtopia Football Podcast. It is great to be with you. I, of course, am Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast, Sports Radio 610 in the mornings, joined as always by my good friend, the Hall of Famer, the great John McClain, our senior columnist for sportsradio610.com. And John, the people have been consuming our preview podcast over the last couple of weeks. You and I are back in the saddle, hitting that runway to Texans training camp next week. So very excited. It's good to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you. I'm excited about training camp, too. D'Amico Ryan's is first. I'm writing a column for Sports Radio 610's website about 10 things they need to achieve in training camp for the start of the regular season. I got an Astros because, the Astros are always news, and they've had some unbelievable games at the Angels, and so I'm pumped and ready to go. People are fired up about sports in Houston. Rockets just made the championship game in the Summer League in Las Vegas where they lost to Cleveland. So things are very positive with our pro sports teams.
Yeah, I would say, cumulatively, everything seems to be trending up. So this is really good. And even the Astros, you and I will get to the Astros in just a minute. I don't know if they're necessarily trending up, but we'll get into how we're feeling about both of them. Couple items of business off the top here before we get into the podcast. There's a lot for us to get into on the pod today here on the Houtopia Football Podcast. First, a quick reminder, if you're just getting the podcast because you clicked on one of our videos or because you clicked on a link on one of our Twitter feeds, if you like what you hear and you want to make sure that you get this podcast each and every episode when it drops, go to the Audacy app, make sure you subscribe. Or if you go wherever you get your podcast, subscribe to the podcast. And we're so close to the preseason starting now. This is the time to get on board with the Houtopia Football Podcast. Nobody will be more immersive than this podcast when it comes to the Texans, both on game day and throughout the week here on the Houtopia Football Podcast. So subscribe to the podcast. And John, for people local in Houston that listen to the podcast, I'm very excited about this. This is something that I know you've done in the past with our good friend Steve Fronterhouse, who runs the Houstonian here in town. But I'm excited to get to do this with you as sort of an adjunct to the podcast. The Houtopia Football Podcast is going on the road for the first time for an event at the Houstonian Hotel for our 2023 Hard Knocks dinner.
I'm fired up about it. It's August 24th. It's right when people are going to be pumped about the regular season. I just tweeted about it, and people can go to Houstonian's website, Houstonian.com, and find out more details, or they can look at my Twitter account. It's going to be fun. We'll talk Texans, we'll talk college football, Astros, and anything anybody wants to talk about. You and I did this. I did it 3 times. You and Seth did it with me once. I had each of our morning guys, our midday guys, and our afternoon guys, and it was a lot of fun hanging out with fans, talking all sports Houston. So we're going to do it on August 24th, and we hope people come. We do a meet and greet. They put on a great show over there, fantastic food, and we look forward to it.
Yeah, we can't just do a drive-by on the food, John, because this is the food that Steve Fronterhouse and the staff put together for the people that come to this thing. It's an amazing spread. It is really good. It's buffet style. Carving station, the whole 9 yards when we went there last time. And I know he's going to do it upright again. So we can't gloss over the food. The food is a very, very big part of this event. As two guys who like to eat, there's not as much of us to love anymore back in the day, but we both still love to eat. This is a great event, not only for a little fellowship and some football and some good conversation, but some great food as well.
I can't wait.
Yep. $159 per person. And that gets you the event, the conversation, the meet and greet. We take pictures, the whole 9 yards, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun, and the food's going to be delicious, and it's a beautiful atmosphere. It's in the Hearth Room at the Houstonian. So you can go to the Houstonian website, and as John mentioned, check out his social media. I've been retweeting everything John's been putting up about this. So if that sounds like an event you would want to go to, and I promise you, the last few we did a few years ago were great. We did them pre-COVID. These are the first ones we've gotten to do. This is the first one you and I have gotten to do as a podcast, John. So if you like what you hear on this podcast, but you want to do it in a more intimate setting and get to talk to us in person and enjoy some great food, we'll see you at the Hard Knocks dinner on August 24th at 7 p.m. All right, John, you ready to get into some of the happenings going on around the world of Houston and the NFL and so forth here?
Sean, you know I'm always
You're always ready. I know you're always ready. Let's start with DeAndre Hopkins, because I think, as you've mentioned, every time we've brought up Hopkins on this podcast, he still moves the needle quite a bit here in Houston. And since you and I last did a podcast, he has agreed to a deal with the Tennessee Titans, 2 years, $26 million. There's another $6 million he can earn in incentives. He immediately becomes their best wide receiver in Tennessee, which is not saying much. It's not a deep wide receiver room at all. But I've got a few angles I want to get your take on here. First, since we've got a lot of Texan fans listening, who I'm sure all still love DeAndre Hopkins, now that we know what the market ended up being for Hopkins, years and cost-wise, and I know you've pointed out that the Texans really were not in this market at all from the beginning. Now knowing what it was, is this a market the Texans should have been in with DeAndre Hopkins, given their wide receiver room needs?
Absolutely not. They didn't want two 31-year-old starting wide receivers when they're still rebuilding. The third year of Nick Casario's rebuilding plan. And they're rebuilding with young guys. And they have some veterans that they signed, but not long-term contracts. So I think if you had Robert Woods and Hopkins as your starting wide receivers, that's not what you're into. And I'm glad he wanted $15 million a year. Then it went down to 10. And I think his agent used the Patriots. I'm amazed at how little the national media and the New England media gave any credence to about how bad the relationship was between Bill O'Brien and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, maybe time and money heal those wounds, but those guys, they had a terrible relationship, and that's why he got traded to begin with. So I never thought he was going there. He should have gone to Tennessee. Mike Vrabel was with him 4 years. Tim Kelly, their offensive coordinator, was with him 6 years. They know he's not going to practice much. They don't care because they want him on game day. And if he went to New England, a lot of the same problems O'Brien and he had here in Houston, he would have had there in Foxborough. So I'm not surprised he went there. I did a Nashville talk show this morning. They asked me, do you think he can be as great as he used to be? Well, we're not going to know. He's missed 15 games the last 2 seasons. He's had 2 injuries and a 6-game suspension. He just turned 31 last month. His game was never about speed. I told him he's not going to beat anybody down the boundary or run post patterns. He's all about getting off the line, running routes, and using his hands to make great catches. And I think he'll have a profound positive effect in their second-year receiver, Treylon Burks. And Derrick Henry is going to run the ball most of the time. They're not going to be a prolific passing team. A.J. Brown, he's a game breaker. As the Texans know well, he beats you down the field. Op's going to be a different receiver to play inside and outside. And hopefully he's 100%. He doesn't get hurt again. So I wish him the best of luck. And because I always like covering him. And he's going to look good in that Columbia blue.
Okay, well, we'll get to the Columbia blue in just a second, specifically the uniforms in just a second. But I want to stick with Hopkins and the on-the-field impact. And you talk a lot to folks up in Tennessee. You do several media appearances per week up in Tennessee, with the Titans being the former Oilers. And I'm curious, are the people that you talk to about this, John, having any sort of aging wide receiver PTSD over this right now? This is Hopkins, age-wise and productivity-wise, kind of lines up with some guys that they've historically brought in, going all the way back to Carl Pickens in 2000, but Randy Moss in 2010. More recently, obviously, and probably the easiest comparison for people listening to this podcast to make would be Andre Johnson in 2016 after Andre's year in Indianapolis. Andre left the Titans halfway through that season and retired. Julio Jones, probably definitely the more recent analogy to this. What makes Hopkins different than those other aging receivers that brought with them a lot of fanfare, but ultimately fizzled out?
Talk show I did this morning, their former receiver, Derek Mason, is one of the hosts. And he was asking me, and I said, well, you played the position in the NFL. You know what happens when you get to 30. You don't have the great speed anymore. He never had great speed, so that's not going to be a big deal. But the key for him is does he still have this quickness? And Derek Mason hit me up with some stats about how much he played in the slot at Arizona. And, that's about quickness and I think a lot of that was more about him getting double teamed and moving him around. And I think based on speed was never his game. If he's healthy, then and plus he's going to be motivated. He's got a lot to prove. Put a thing out on Twitter about the people, the naysayers, the haters. So it shows he's already thinking about that. But I think I think playing with Ryan Tannehill, he's never going to have the numbers he had here, 100 catches. They asked me if I thought he'd catch 80 balls. I said no. I said Derrick Henry's going to probably lead the league in rushing. And plus they got Burks. They're going to try to prove that Burks was a good choice in the first round. Hop will get all the double teams. Treylon Burks will get the single coverage. And he's the one that should benefit the most from having Hopkins on that roster.
Yeah. To me, that's the case. Of a big reason they're signing Hopkins is because they need Treylon Burks to have less attention. That's an indicator to me that Burks selection is already a bit of a failure, right? I mean, they traded that pick. They traded A.J. Brown for the package that included that pick. They were hoping to do what Minnesota did, I think, with trading Stephon Diggs and getting a pick that turns into Justin Jefferson. And they whiffed badly. A.J. Brown's been great in Philadelphia, and now they're having to go bring in aging wide receivers to attract attention to free up Treylon Burks. Well, I guess, what are you, just generally, John, like, what are your thoughts on what the Titans are going to be this year? And does Hopkins move the needle? Does he change their trajectory as a team at all anymore?
No, I don't think one player in the NFL makes that big a difference unless he's a game breaker. And Hopkins not a game breaker. Ryan Tannehill played 12 games last season, then he got hurt. So if Hop's playing with Will Levis, they're going to run the ball a lot if they want to play Levis near the end of the year, because Tannehill's out of there after this season. And they could have found a way to keep A.J. Brown. I think even though nothing's ever been said about why John Robinson was fired during last season, I think it all started to go downhill when he traded him. I don't think he talked to others about it. That's what I heard. He just did it. They said on TV, you could see Vrabel grimace, and you could hear everybody in Houston, Jacksonville, and Indianapolis cheering when A.J. Brown got traded by the Titans. So
no doubt.
I think that there's still going to be a running team. That's what Vrabel does. They hope that Hop can still draw double coverages. You never know. I can't wait till the Texans play him. Derek Stingley Jr. was drafted 3rd overall to cover the opponent's best receiver. And we'll see. Hopefully he'll stay healthy, and we'll see what he can do against Hopkins.
That'll be fun. Well, yeah, I mean, they play in week 15 and week 17. Like, I'd love to. What are the odds that Hopkins and Stingley are both healthy for that, given both of their recent track records medically here? Along those lines, John, look, there's no media member that has more ties to both the team, the former Oilers, and the fan base of the Oilers, former Oiler fans, or maybe even still current Oiler fans who root for the Titans, who knows, than you. What do you think the reaction is going to be for specifically Houstonians that are rooting for the Texans nowadays when they see DeAndre Hopkins possibly in week 15 in that Oiler uniform?
I believe when they play up there, they're going to be wearing the Oiler throwback uniforms, and Houston fans they already are, infuriated that they would do that. And they've only worn them one time. That was in their first preseason game when they moved, and they were in Canton. And I was there covering them. It was weird to go in the locker room and see those Columbia blue jerseys. Fans up there, they think their throwback uniforms are what they wore as the Tennessee Oilers their first 2 seasons before they were renamed the Titans. They don't think about Houston, but I think it's going to be great fodder for talk shows in Houston. I think it'll be great fodder for columnists, and I can't wait to talk about it. And I think the media will stir it up even more. And nothing would be better for the Texans, of course, to go up there and beat them when they wore Columbia blue, even though the Texans don't give a damn. That was not their team or their colors.
John, the only thing, like, Hopkins wearing an Oilers uniform is like a walking billboard for all the bad memories of like recent and not so recent Houston football history. You got a reminder of the team abandoning the city. You got a reminder of the worst trade in the history. All we need is Jack Easterby flipping the coin before the game, doing the coin toss, and it'll be just like that would be a great troll job by the Titans. Just bring in Jack Easterby to toss the coin before the game, and then we're good. You are in everybody's head in Houston at that point.
I think that would be. Now, that part is not going to happen. I think when they see Hop in no matter what uniform it is, it just reminds everybody here that he was traded in the worst trade in Texans history, second worst trade in Houston football history to Kenny Houston going to Washington. And if he has a great game, it'll be worse. And who are they going to blame? They're going to blame Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby.
I'm sad we're not going to get to see an O'Brien-Hopkins reunion. I was really looking forward to that. That would have been fun. All right. Well, John, we're going to do some For Real or Fugazis, as we always do, but let's mix in a little Astro talk because you and I haven't had a chance to talk about the Astros in quite some time. When we last did a podcast that would have included any Astro talk, that was way back before the All-Star break. 52-42 right now, John. What's your, I guess, just overall feeling, not about where this team could go. Like, I think they're fully healthy. They're a contender, obviously, but health has been a big issue. But about where they are, given everything that's been thrown at this team by the baseball gods, injury-wise, underperformance-wise, and so forth. What's your overall feeling about where they are right now?
Rangers came out of the All-Star break red hot. They won the first series. They beat the Rays. They got the Rays and the Dodgers. They're playing in Arlington. The Astros had the Angels by Marek after one of the biggest choke jobs in franchise history when they blew that 9-3 lead and then 12-9 lead and lost in 10. And when the Astros go to extra innings, they should just call off the game.
They're terrible.
They're 1-7. You know what, though? The Padres, with all those great hitters, they haven't won an extra inning game. But, they're a big disappointment. And the Astros are not when you consider all the injury problems they've had. And one of the issues I have with them is their good players not producing. Bregman was in a terrible slump till he hit his home run to help come back and beat the Angels. Jeremy Pena, he's no resemblance to what he was at the end of last season. Even though Jose Abreu has his moments, he's still hitting like 70 points less than he was last year. Corey Julks, Chas McCormick, those guys are hitting. We don't know when Urquidy's coming back, Altuve's coming back, Yordan Alvarez is coming back. We get our hopes up because they're supposed to be doing the minor league assignments, and so it may not be till maybe it's going to be the middle of August. Nobody knows. And the trade deadline's August 1st. Dana Brown say he needed a bat. Well, he doesn't need a bat. He needs another starting pitcher, and he needs a bullpen guy who can be counted on because Rafael Montero is awful, and then they're overworked. It is amazing. This team is 10 games over 500 with all the issues they've had with injuries and ineptness, and it's just Dusty may be doing his best managerial job.
He might. I criticize a lot of the micro things that Dusty does. He does a lot of head scratching things. There's no doubt about that.
Yes, he does.
But the overall results that he's getting right now, like if someone had listed everything that's happened to this team from the beginning of the year through now and who's been missing and how it's happened and everything else, and the performance of guys who've been fully healthy, like Bregman and Abreu, who've been healthy all year long, and both have underperformed, I would have said that I would have said best case they're where like Seattle is right now, like sitting at 500, kind of lurking, definitely needing to make moves. And this team needs to make moves. There's no doubt about that. Just if nothing else to build depth, because the conventional wisdom that I hear from everybody is, well, they are going to get Altuve and Yordan back. And then once they get them back, like, okay, they're getting back the two guys that are injured all the time. Like what's to say they're not going to get injured again in September? Let me ask you this, John, real quick on the Astros here. Yordan is the guy they need back. There's no doubt about that. He's the guy that makes everything go offensively for this team, and they need him in the middle of that lineup. If you could pick one to bring back today, you'll get the other one back down the road, but bring one back today. Would it be Jose Urquidy or Jose Altuve?
Urquidy because they're desperate for another starting pitcher, and Mauricio Dubon has done a really good job replacing Altuve and others. Let me ask you something.
Yep.
They're not going to get a good starting pitcher. They may be getting somebody who's mediocre, and they hope they can bring out better. But would you give up right now? I'd give up Jake Myers in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah.
But would you give up Corey Julks based on how well he's done? Or would you give up Chas McCormick, who has been on fire? And then they're going to have to give up some of their minor league outfielders. Brown said they will not give up Drew Gilbert, but they're loaded with minor league outfielders. They're not loaded with pitchers. We may see Spencer Getty coming up. He's at AAA. Was it AA? But would you trade? Say you had to include Julks or McCormick. Who would you trade?
Look, Chaz was just the AL Player of the Week this past week, so people are going to hear my answer and say, well, that's a recency bias because he had such a good series against the Angels. I would have said this 2 weeks ago. I would trade Corey Julks in a heartbeat. I don't think Julks is a guy who was factoring into this team's future at all, John, until spring training this year. And he's been good, but he's not been he's a rotational guy in the outfield right now. The big thing to me is Chaz is battle tested. We don't know what Corey Julks looks like in October. We know what Chaz looks like in October. He took that job by the horns in October, and he made some of the biggest plays in the history of this baseball team in the postseason. To me, it's a fair question, but to me, it's an easy choice. And I would, if somebody wants, if Dana Brown is sitting there across from somebody or on a Zoom with somebody, and they're down to it's Julks or Chaz, that's an easy choice for me.
Plus, Chaz is a much better fielder than Corey Julks is. And but I'd trade Myers and Julks if it helped, and if I had to include a young guy too, because they do have some talent in A and AA.
Yeah.
And but they're going to have to give up something to get. And even though J.P. France and Brandon Belak have been better than anybody ever thought they would, those guys shouldn't even be in the majors.
No, you can't go into the postseason with Brandon Belak as one of your starters. You just can't. You can't.
Can they go into the postseason with Hunter Brown and Christian Javier pitching away? People acted like Javier was great. 5 innings, 3 runs, 4 hits, 7 Ks. That's not vintage Javier. And then Brown, I can't wait to see Brown because both those guys were awful, and everybody acts like it's because they're overworked. If they think they're overworked now, wait till they get to September.
Anybody who thought that Javier made progress is just looking at the box score in that start. And he did have more strikeouts. He hadn't been striking guys out before that, so that was a concern. But, John, the first inning of that game, he put up a goose egg, but Shohei Ohtani had 2 of the hardest hit foul balls I think I've ever seen in my life, and then ended up getting out because he hit an even harder line drive right at the shortstop, who was shifted behind second. But and then the next hitter up, I think it was Mickey. Is it Moniak?
Moniak.
Yeah. He hit one to the warning track. Javier's not fixed. He's not fixed yet. And not to the point where he needs to be. He's their number 2 starter. It'd be one thing if he was their 4 or 5. Most major league teams, that's what their 4 or 5 looks like. He gets knocked around, 2 out of every 5 starts. If you get 6 innings out of him, great. This is a guy they gave $13 million a year to while he still had 3 years of arbitration left before the season, and made him they anointed him the number 2 guy and let Verlander walk. It's tricky, man. It's bad. It's bad.
That's the truth.
All right. So that's our Astro talk right there. So I would say overall, grateful that they are where they are right now, but they need to get some guys back, and they need some new faces in there. I think it's safe to say. All right. John, you ready to do some Forreal or Fugazis here?
Always.
It's been 3 weeks since we've done these, John. I missed it. All right, so let's do this. I got a few of these here. For those who don't know how this works, John and I do this typically every first episode of the week, every Monday. This is a Tuesday. We're recording this on a Tuesday just because of schedules and things like that. I read a sentence as if it is the truth to John and get John's opinion on it. If he agrees that it is the truth, he says for real. If he thinks that the statement is silly and it's false, he says Fugazi. That's Italian for fake or counterfeit or phony. All right, John, here we go. Texans announced this week the themes for all of their home games this year. The homecoming game, appropriately so, will be October the 1st against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the day that J.J. Watt will be enshrined in the Ring of Honor for the Texans. For real or Fugazi, there will be a huge throng of Steeler fans at that homecoming game on October the 1st.
I believe that's for real. I think they were probably buying those tickets. Steeler fans travel great. There's a lot of Steelers fans in the Houston area. And I also think when J.J. Watt comes out, they'll give him a standing ovation. One of the coolest things I've ever seen in all my years, 48 years covering the NFL, was Watt's last game at Santa Clara against the 49ers.
Yeah.
They took him off the field, and the 49ers fans stood and gave him a great ovation and started chanting his name, J.J. Watt, J.J. Watt. And he's down there with his wife, Kaylee, and his kid. Excuse me. And it was just one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. Coaches like D'Amico Ryans on the 49ers are clapping for him. And so I think Steeler fans will give him a huge ovation.
I think they'd do it even if TJ Watt wasn't a Pittsburgh Steeler. It feels
I
like
do
that
too.
I think that's the kind of fan base. It feels like that's the kind of fan base the Steelers have, John, that kind of respect the history of things like that. Am I on base? You know better than I do. Am I off base on that? Like Steeler fans feel like respectful. They feel like Nebraska fans in college football. They respect the game.
They respect the game. They respect other fans. And the older ones remember the great rivalry they've had through the years when they were the same division as the Oilers. Franco Harris told me one time in Canton, he said, people always thought our biggest rival was Oakland because we played them so many times. No, the biggest rival and the toughest games were against the Oilers during the Levy Blue era.
Yeah, a lot of history there for sure. Just as a one quick number to back up the Steeler game hype, the anticipation for that Steeler game on October the 1st at NRG Stadium, John, on SeatGeek, the lowest price ticket for the Steelers-Texans game in Houston is a little over $200, $201, I think, as of this morning. The next closest lowest price for a game at NRG Stadium this year, New Orleans, $62. That's the next closest one. The rest of them are all, even Deshaun Watson coming back like on Christmas Eve, the lowest price ticket is $36. You can go to the Jacksonville game for $22 if you want to. You can't sit lower than the last row of that Steeler game for less than $200. So I think it says a lot about Steeler fans for one, but I think it also says a lot about Texan fans wanting to be there to experience, the Texan culmination of J.J. Watt. The culmination will be in Canton in 5 years when you and your colleagues put him in to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But it's a hot ticket, John, is what I'm saying. Oh, you're muted, John.
I said, you think he's getting in the Hall of Fame, huh?
Yeah, I think he is. I'm going to stand on the table for him, John.
Yeah, I think he will be. If I'm still here and I'm on the committee, when the time comes, I don't have to make much of a speech because he's a no-brainer. He and Tom Brady will go in together.
That'll be a fun class for sure. All right, next one, John, for real or Fugazi. We saw this week the deadline for franchise tag players signing an extension came and went, and the main guys still left sitting out there with the franchise tag are running backs, specifically Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs. I know Tony Pollard's out there too, but Barkley and Jacobs are the two that sound like could miss training camp because they want to get a better deal. We know that running back market, though, has gotten worse and worse for guys, especially in free agency with that franchise tag. For real or Fugazi, the NFL needs to do something to accommodate running backs in free agency.
Fugazi, why does the NFL need to get involved in that? The players, if you can, I see tight ends. Evan Ingram got a better deal than any of those backs. Is his career going to be with Jacksonville longer than them? I think what happened with Zeke Elliott, I think, is just 27, and he's out there. He got cut. Cowboys are hoping he'll come back for almost the minimum. And I don't know why this is, but it's like Matt Miller from ESPN said, it stirred up a ruckus among the backs. You draft a guy, you get him for 5 years, then you franchise him for 2, you got him for 7, then you let him go and draft another one. And unfortunately for them, that's the way it is. And so many offenses are tailored around backs who are lesser picks, but you still get results. Don't lead the league in rushing. There's more second-round picks who've done better than first. It's like Dameon Pierce. When it comes contract time, he'll be glad he was not drafted in the first round.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny too, John, with that. Like, Barkley was the second overall pick in his class. Jacobs was a first-round pick. It's almost like the guys who are drafted higher have a higher expectation of what the second contract should look like. Whereas, like, a guy drafted in the middle rounds, let's take Dameon Pierce as an example. Like, if Dameon Pierce gets to a franchise tag, that's a huge success story. Like, that's
absolutely.
I'm not just saying for the Texans. I'm saying for Dameon Pierce, that's because by the time he gets at that stage, it's the franchise tag for running backs probably be 12 million, 13 million, whatever. It's like 11 million right now. So it'll be a couple million more possibly when he gets there. I just think to me, the issue isn't just how fungible running backs are as an asset, like how replaceable they are. To me, it's the fact that position has a specific age where guys drop off, a specific odometer on running backs that prevents the second contracts from being big. I think it's more that than it is like, well, we'll just get this guy and swap him out for a 4th-round pick because this guy, yeah, sure, Miles Sanders is good, but we'll just draft some guy and he'll be 80% of him. I just think teams are way too scared that, we're signing this guy and this could be the year that he falls off, as opposed to other positions where, wide receiver has that, but the age is 31. It's not 27 like it is for running backs. You know what I mean?
And then there's Derrick Henry, and one of the reasons at 29 he's still going strong is he didn't get a lot of carries his first 3 years in the league, and then he just exploded. And in fact, he's 6'3" and almost 250. It helps him withstand a lot of that punishment. And at some point, maybe it'll go back. Maybe a running back will score 3 or 4 touchdowns in the Super Bowl when he's in the last year of his contract. I still think the Giants should have found a way to tie up Saquon Barkley. They'll have him 2 more years, and that's it. Because you draft him so high, and seems like you draft him that high, you have high expectations. And he was a more important player than Daniel Jones. It's got to irk him like crazy to see Daniel Jones get all that money, and he's stuck with $10.1 million.
Yeah, it is, but like Daniel Jones plays a position, it's unfortunately Saquon Barkley is the accounts receivable clerk who's incredible at his job, and Daniel Jones is the director of sales who is just okay at his job, but they pay a lot more. They're a lot harder to find. You know what I mean? That's what it is. It's
accounts receivable.
That's it. No disrespect to any of you accounts receivable clerks that listen to this podcast. We appreciate you.
I'm sure there'll be love. Tell the friends that you compared him to Saquon Barkley.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to buy. If you're an accounts receivable clerk who listens to this podcast, houmailbag@gmail.com. You email me. I'm not going to buy you a Saquon Barkley jersey, but I'm going to put all of you in a drawing where I'll buy a Saquon Barkley jersey and the winner gets it. How's that? You have to prove you're an AR clerk, though. I need a business card or proof from your boss. A note. I need a note from your boss. That's what I need. I just kind of hijacked the next one I had, John. You agreed with this. The next one I had, Forreal or Fugazi, best case scenario for Dameon Pierce is a franchise tag in 2026. You said that's for real, right?
Well, let me think about it. Fugazi, because he'd be better getting a long-term contract after 3 seasons, because you got to figure if he got a 4-year extension, he'd only be 27. So I think because if you get anything more in 1 year, he's going to make more than the franchise tag.
No, I understand a long-term deal is better than a 1-year franchise tag deal. I guess what I'm injecting into this, John, is a dose of reality. Like, do we think for a second that Nick Caserio is giving a long-term extension to a 3rd-year running back who has Dameon Pierce's running style and presumably will have had a bunch of carries on the odometer? What do you think the chances are that happens?
Well, I think they're pretty good because they got Devin Singletary for a reason to take a lot of that wear and tear off of him.
Yeah, maybe.
And especially if he only does 2 more years, he'll only be like 24. So I think there's a chance he'll get a second contract unless his agent prices him out of the market. If he does, then they'll franchise him, and he ought to be happy with that.
I don't have the stomach for a contract dispute between the Texans and Dameon Pierce, John. I like them both too much. I don't like seeing friends fight. I'm a friend of the Texans and a fan of the Texans, and I love Dameon Pierce. I can't say that I'm a friend of his other than I've interviewed him a couple times on the postgame show, but I would love to be his friend if he's listening to this podcast.
Now, I don't think Dameon Pierce will handle his contract negotiations like cornerback Steven Nelson. And I can't wait to see when we get to camp if Casario's wearing that blue vest. If he doesn't, I think I'll ask him if it's at the cleaners.
Dude, yeah, you should. B, if he's wearing a vest in this heat, he should be fired on the spot.
That's what I'll say. Nick's it too hot for that blue vest?
He should be shirtless. I like if you wear the vest or shirtless, go Skins. Go shirtless. All right, John. Also along those lines, this is a Forreal or Fugazi. This is kind of one that I got off the text page today when Seth and I were talking about the whole dynamics of the running back position. Forreal or Fugazi, there is not an active NFL running back right now that will wind up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Forreal or Fugazi?
Oh, boy. If I had to pick one, it would be I'll say Forreal. But if I had to pick one who's a possibility, it would be Derrick Henry.
Yep.
If he plays a couple more years and keeps compiling the big numbers, because people have seen the kind of punishment he takes playing on a team that everybody knows is going to run the ball, and they stack the deck against him. A guy like Bijan Robinson, it's too early to tell, but because of the way the position's devalued, you're probably right.
Henry is the leading active ground gainer in the NFL, a little over 8,000 yards. Because I've looked up, there's a handful, as you know, John, that are 10,000, 11,000 yards or more that are retired that still aren't in the Hall of Fame, but will be. Adrian Peterson, I would imagine, will be a first or second ballot Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
Frank Gore, I don't know where you stand on Frank Gore and what his candidate. He's the third all-time leading rusher, and yet he was an All-Pro, I think, once his entire career.
Because he played so many years.
Yeah, so Gore is out there. Like Fred Taylor is out there, guys like that. So I think Adrian Peterson might be the only one who's retired of that ilk that's going in. So it may be a while. Once Peterson's in, it might be a long time. I'm curious, John, did you see or hear about the interview that Corey Dillon did about the Hall of Fame?
Oh, yeah, I did. He's mad about the Cincinnati Bengals Hall of Fame and the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
He'd be fortunate. He deserves to be in the Bengals Hall of Fame, but they do something I've never seen. They let the fans vote.
Okay,
that's his complaint.
Yeah, you know what? It's probably a valid complaint. Has his name? I guess he's never been even a semifinalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Does his name ever come up for the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
Not that I can remember.
Okay, I mean
you mentioned Fred Taylor. He's dead because he's got over 10,000 yards rushing. He was a really good receiver. There's a big push for him a lot. Roger Craig, he's back. He's a senior now, Ricky Waters, but those guys didn't get in their 20 years of modern eligibility. Now their proponents are trying to get them in as seniors, but it's hard.
Yeah. All right, two more, John. The Astros, Forreal or Fugazi, the Astros will be in first place in the AL West by the time the trade deadline rolls around on August the 1st.
Fugazi. I think the Rangers are red hot. They've got hitting. It's consistent. Aroldis Chapman has been pitching great.
He has.
He has been tremendous.
He's really good.
That was a great trade with Kansas City.
Yeah.
And they're going to shore up their bullpen. They got a minor league system that allows them to trade some prospects. I think because they've been bad for a while, they've been able to stockpile talent, which the Astros have not.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of that is losing your first and second round picks
in
back-to-back years because of the scandal.
Yep.
But I think the Rangers, when the trade deadline rolls around, will still be in first place. It's too bad. When the Astros come home from this 9-game road trip, they're going to play the Rangers for the last time this season.
At Minute Maid, and then they play one more time Labor Day weekend, I think, in Arlington.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Last time here in Houston for sure. Are you buying the Rangers as a suitor for Shohei Ohtani?
No, not at all.
You had to pick one team to get Shohei Ohtani. Or
Dodgers.
You think it's the Dodgers? Yeah, okay. That's who you would pick, and that's who you think it will be.
There's a lot of people think he's going to give. I read a thing on The Athletic talking about 5 to 8 players for a rental. No, nobody's going to give up 5 to 8 players for a month or two. Even Steve Cohen wouldn't do that. I think the Angels should trade him. And one of the things I've been wondering is that all these endorsement deals that the Angels make off of him and he makes off of companies in Japan, would they want a rebate if the Angels trade him because the Angels are making all this money from these deals? Or has that already been written into the
I bet it's
contract?
Yeah, it's got to be. There has to be some protection there, right?
Those are smart people. And so everybody thinks he's going to the Dodgers anyway. The key here is, with Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, they've been a big disappointment. And money's no issue to him. When Shohei Ohtani's going to get $550 million, when he come back and say, well, I'll give you another $100 million, would he go cross country and play in New York? Or would he stay on the West Coast where he wanted to go begin with?
Yeah, that's probably a conversation for after the season with the Mets. They're just not in position to do anything this year. So it'd be a waste for the Mets to trade 5 prospects for Shohei Ohtani and give him $600 million when they can just do that after. They're not winning the World Series with Shohei Ohtani this year. But the Mets are number 2 on the odds board that I saw behind the Dodgers. I'll tell you one, John, that I was reading an article this week in The Athletic from Jim Bowden, who's a former GM. And he was listing the landing spots for Shohei Ohtani. And the number 1 spot he had, he's the only one I've seen have this. They're not that high up the odds board, but I think he made a great case for it. And it's Tampa Bay. Obviously, they're not going to sign Shohei Ohtani long term, but they've got the most flush minor league system with prospects. And they're already a really good baseball team. Like they might win it without Shohei Ohtani, but Shohei Ohtani, if they've got the minor league players to do it, he's only owed, as of the trade deadline, he'll only be owed another $13 million this season. They've got the money to do it, reportedly, according to the owners. I think that's an interesting one to watch is Tampa Bay, especially because that could seal up the number 1 overall seed in the American League for them, which would be really big. Everybody comes through Tampa at that point, and they get a bye in the first round and all that. That was an interesting one to me. I'll just say that.
They should be motivated because they're on their way to their second worst record in July in team history.
Yeah.
They've been on a terrible plunge. And another one, he wouldn't re-sign there. He wouldn't re-sign the one I'm going to say, but there's nobody loaded with more great prospects than Baltimore.
Yes, I agree.
The Orioles are 22 games over 500. Isn't it amazing? Yankees last place, first time since 1990. And Baltimore is loaded. And I read that Jim Bowden piece, and he's the one that was saying 5 to 8 players. There's no way that's going to happen. And Ohtani's representatives have already told teams there's no way he's going to sign a new contract with a new team now. He wants to test the market.
I said, John, today on Payne and Pendergast that the best approach for the Angels would be, because I don't think he's re-signing. Definitely don't think he's re-signing if they just hang on to him and let the season fitter away. There's no way him sitting there on a non-playoff Angels team is going to be let's re-sign here. I think the Angels have a better chance of keeping Ohtani long-term if they trade him to the team that he wants to go to.
Absolutely.
Bring in a bunch of prospects and then try to resell to him, hey, man, we took care of you when we said we would.
We're better.
Look how much better this team is. You get to stay in L.A. You know your way around the building already here and all that stuff. You know who your teammates are. There's no burn-in period where you're going to get to know. It's your – I compared it to Indecent Proposal, John. Did you remember that movie with Demi Moore? In my analogy, Shohei Ohtani was Demi Moore. Yeah. And the Angels are Woody Harrelson, the bankrupt architect who is looking to get assets. He just needs currency at that point. And so he is approached in a Vegas casino by, let's call Robert Redford, the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the Los Angeles Dodgers say, you know what? I think 5 to 8 prospects could buy Love. And Woody Harrelson says, I don't know. And he says, I think it could. Okay, fine. And he sends Shohei over to Robert Redford / the Los Angeles Dodgers and then just sits and prays and hopes that, unlike Demi Moore, Shohei doesn't fall in love with the Dodgers. Although she eventually came back to Woody Harrelson in the end of the movie.
Yeah, and their marriage was never the same.
No, I wanted a sequel. Seth said it today. He's like, we needed a sequel where we got to see the years of therapy after that. All right, last one, John. Speaking of Hollywood, Forreal or Fugazi, noted award-winning actor John McClain is feeling the pinch of the actors' strike right now.
I certainly am. That's a for real. I'm on strike. Of course, I've been on strike since 2008. But I support my fellow actors and writers, and I feel comfortable not accepting any offers for new movies.
I'm sure that the likes of Harrison Ford and Fran Drescher and all the other actors I've seen opining on this strike are glad that they have your support, John. Oh, do you?
I should go walk the picket line.
You should fly to LA. That would be incredible. That would actually be a hell of a piece of content. I've got my
SAG card.
I know you do. That's I think it's funny, John. Like I get like the fight is really for the 99.9% of actors who are, have multiple jobs. And, like, I just think it's funny that they make the face that they try to invoke sympathy for the actors by making like these huge multi-gajillionaire actors the face of it. Like I literally saw Fran Drescher doing it. Fran Drescher probably makes $20 million a year on residuals from The Nanny from 15 years ago. And she's like the face of this strike. There's no other, I guess, other than professional sports where the face of it is, Tom Glavine was the face of the work stoppage in 1995 or whatever. So that's what I compare it to. Like, people are going to be like, all right, so are we supposed to shed tears for Tom Cruise that he's getting mistreated on Mission Impossible 12 or whatever he's on right now? It's just funny to me.
I heard he got $80 million for that movie.
$80 million. Yeah, see, that's the problem. He needs to spread some of that wealth. $80 million. Have you seen it yet, John?
I did.
What'd you think?
I liked it. I didn't think it was the greatest, but He's 61 years old. He's doing things that, of course, that are preposterous. But I wanted to see more of Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg. But it was interesting. It always is. But it's just nonstop. And I can't wait to see Oppenheimer, and I can't wait to see the new Justified sequel on FX. But Oppenheimer has gotten universal praise. A lot of young people may not care about it because it had to do with the atomic bomb in World War II, but I'll guarantee older people are going to want to see it. Yeah,
the movies seem to be getting back to where they're better than they like. Post-COVID, the movie scene was atrocious. It was really bad. I saw the Elvis movie after we went to Graceland on our trip. We watched the Elvis movie the next night. Have you seen the Elvis movie?
Oh, I saw that one first day it came out. I loved it.
Yeah, it was really good. I had no idea. I didn't know the Colonel was that big a scumbag. It was really more a movie about the Colonel than it was about Elvis.
What'd you think? Tom Cruise took a lot of heat for doing that part. They didn't like his accent, even though it was real, the way Parker talked. They just didn't like his character at all. And I thought Austin Butler did an incredible job.
I actually went and sought out an old interview with the Colonel, John, on Ted Koppel from back in 1987. They were doing like a 10-year Elvis, like some sort of like big Elvis show, something the Colonel would have done. Like he was a carny basically. So he had all this Elvis memorabilia. And it was the 10-year anniversary of Elvis's death. So he had people coming out, paying X amount to take their picture with different Elvis stuff. So he did an interview with Ted Koppel, and I'm like, damn, Tom Hanks freaking nailed that. He was on target with that accent and everything.
People hated it. How many movies have we seen Tom Hanks in where people hated him?
Not that I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, this is by far the most despised character I think I've ever seen Tom Hanks play.
Absolutely.
He's usually the baby face in all these things, to use a wrestling term. All right. So James Jackson, our producer, by the way, is telling us in the chat not to mix him in with the generation that won't appreciate Oppenheimer, John. James is going to appreciate Oppenheimer.
Well, it's because James is intelligent.
He is. He's a great producer, too. And this is where we wrap things up by thanking James for producing this Houtopia football podcast, thanking all of you for listening, downloading, clicking subscribe, going to the Audacy app, most of all, telling a friend. and we spread the word, and training camp begins next week. And John will do one more of these later this week. It's great to catch up with you again, my friend.
I look forward to seeing you at the Houstonian, and thank you very much.
All right. Yes, the Houstonian, August the 24th. Go to, is it Houstonian.com, John? Is that the
Houstonian.com?
Houstonian.com if you want to sign up for the Hard Knocks dinner. Great dinner and a night of talking football with me and John McClain. For our producer, James Jackson, and for John McClain, I'm Sean Pendergast. We are out of time. We will see all of you later this week for another episode of the Houtopia Football Podcast. Have a great day, everybody.